has supernatural powers. So I kind of got scared and didn't want to re-record it again, but here I am recording it, and I'm gonna continue making this scrunchie. It's a scrunchie. This is a story about a controversial Russian man who was also involved with the Russian royal empire, the Russian royal family. So this is kind of like a murder story and a history lesson as well. Grigoriy Yefimovich Rasputin was born on January 21st, 1869 in Siberia, Russia. He was born in a village called Pokrovskaya in Tyumen Oblast. He was born to a peasant family. His family was very religious. His dad worked as a peasant farmer, and he also was a church elder. He apparently had 8 siblings who all died in infancy, unfortunately. And so he was the only one who survived. And this was very common, actually, at the time in Siberia, because of how cold it was and the hospitals and everything was located very far away from the villages. So by the time you get to the hospital, a lot of times, especially babies, they wouldn't make it because people had to walk to the hospitals. There's not much information, unfortunately, about Rasputin's young adulthood, but it is known that he never finished school. So because of that, he was quite illiterate. And this was also very common in Siberia due to the fact that because everyone was so poor and it was so cold, they had to put young children to work as well. So by the time they're 8 or 9 years old, they are working and helping their parents. In 1887, Rasputin married a woman. Her name was Praskovia Dubrovina, and they ended up eventually having 7 children, but only 3 of them survived. The rest died when they were very young, as it was common in Siberia. Praskovia was also a very devoted wife, and she was actually with him throughout everything until his death. In the late 20s, Rasputin had a religious awakening after going on a pilgrimage. This is when he actually left his village of Pokrovskaya for the first time in his life. And there are some sources that indicate that he actually So he left his family for this pilgrimage. And this is when he visited the St. Nicholas Monastery at Verkhoturye village in 1897. This is where he met an elder. His name was Makari. And Makari taught him how to read and write. And Rasputin actually spent a few months at the monastery with Makari, learning how to read and write. And he came back to his own village of Pokrovskaya, a changed and different man. He started to believe that you become close with God after overcoming your earthly passions, and the only way to achieve that is through sexual exhaustion. When he walked through the forests of Siberia, many historians actually believe that he ran into this cult that lived in the forests, and they were called the Clisties. The Clisties. And this was an underground Christian cult that split from the Orthodox Russian Christian Church. Many of the members actually would show up to the Russian Church, the Orthodox Russian Church, on Sundays, but they would afterwards go to the forest and have their own secret meetings. This cult believed that salvation can only be achieved through the clearing of your sin. They would have ceremonies when they would choke one another and then let go at the last moment to achieve asphyxiation high. They wanted to achieve asphyxiation high. The cult also spoke in tongues, and they also liked to spin around until they felt very dizzy and kind of drunk, and then they would fall on the floor. And this is when they would find a random person that was laying next to them on the floor as well, on the ground, and they would have intercourse with that person. They also had orgies with each other as well. They believed that this purified them from the lusts of the flesh. So Rasputin became some sort of a holy man. He started to travel all over Russia and leaving his family for months or even years at a time. And it is said that he even visited Greece, Mount Athos, and he visited the center of the Orthodox monastic life there. By 19 Russian it was called the Statits, and he was known to heal spiritual crises and anxieties. There were rumors that he would actually also sleep with his female followers. He started not taking good care of himself, never showering. He would not shower for years, actually. And everyone that was around him said he really had this odors coming from him. But they were also saying that this is what made him more spiritual and more closer to God. It is on this journey when he met Archimandrite Andrei and Bishop Christinus, and they gave him a letter of recommendation to Bishop Sergei, who was the rector of St. Petersburg Theological Cemetery at the Alexander Nevsky Monastery. It was one of the biggest monasteries at the time. It is at this monastery where he met Archimandrite Theophan. He was the confessor of Nicholas II, king, and the Queen Alexandra Romanov. At this point, Rasputin became very popular throughout the capital of St. Petersburg in Russia. And St. Petersburg was actually the capital of Russia until the downfall of the Russian Empire in 1918. So now the capital is Moscow, but it wasn't always the capital. There were people who would follow him around, and in his own village of Pokrovskaya, there were people who would come over every Sunday and pray with him. And also, they would go to the basement of his house and have orgies at the house where his wife and kids lived as well. Rasputin was said to be a man who drank a lot as well. So he liked to drink, he liked to party. Those meetings that he had at his house were the subject of hostility and suspicion from the village priest and other people that lived in the village. Tsar Nicholas, the King Nicholas II Romanov, and Alexandra Romanova, they were devoted to the Orthodox Church, but they also believed in supernatural powers and mysticism, and they were amazed by what they've seen Rasputin do. This was a time when the Russian Empire was barely clinging to control, because it was after the Russian Revolution of 1917. So if you have hemophilia, you might bleed for a longer time after an injury because the blood doesn't clot properly. So in 1912, during one of Alexei's bleeding episodes, Rasputin was called to the palace because the family found out about his mystical powers. Rasputin was able to help the boy using his hypnotic powers and some kind of drugs as well. And the next day, Alexei woke up a healed man, a healed boy. Tsarina Alexandra, the Queen Alexandra, she was most impressed with Rasputin, and she was very thankful that he was able to save her son. There were also rumors that the queen allowed Rasputin to spend nights with her in her own bedroom, and this was coming from Rasputin himself when he would brag to others that he spent the night with Tsarina Alexandra. There were also rumors that the two daughters, the older daughters, Olga and Tatiana Romanovna, they were also spending nights with Rasputin because of the way that Rasputin would act with the girls when he would be around them. The two older girls, they were actually in their 20s or late teenagers years at that time, and so they weren't very young, like kids, but still, because Rasputin was able to save Alexei, he was granted a privileged place in the royal court by the royal family. Rasputin actually also made a prophecy that if he died, or if the royal family would somehow leave him, then the son would either die or the family's crown will be gone. The Tsar Nicholas appointed Rasputin to be the lamplighter of the palace. So he was responsible for lighting the lamps next to the religious icons inside the palace. Rasputin, however, became a controversial figure to the Russian civilians, and people started to have mixed views about him. On one hand, the peasants considered him as one of their own and amplified their often unheard voice to the monarchy. However, the nobles and the aristocrats, they started to despise him. In St. Petersburg, Peter Stolypin, who was the prime minister of St. Petersburg, he decided to launch an investigation against Rasputin, and he also invited Tsar Nicholas, and he tried to confront Nicholas that he is giving too much power to Rasputin. But instead, Prime Minister was exiled from St. Petersburg. So that did not work. At this time, Russia was in the midst government decided that the only way to maintain order was to eliminate Rasputin. Sometime in December of 1916, a Russian aristocrat, Felix Yusupov, who was also said to have homosexual relations with Rasputin, he and Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich and Vladimir Purishkevich, they decided that his evil influence over Tsarina Alexandra can only be stopped by his death. So Yusupov decided to create a plan how to lure Rasputin into his palace. He decided to invite him for a housewarming party and tell Rasputin that he wanted to introduce him to his new wife, Irina. So they invited him on the morning of December 30th, 1916, and gave him pastries and wine laced with potassium cyanide, and it was enough cyanide to kill 10 people. Rasputin ate the pastries and drank the wine and had no ill effect. He continued sitting there for hours, and this really frustrated Yusupov. So he decided to take another measure of killing him. So he borrowed a revolver from Grand Duke Dmitry and shot Rasputin. He shot him several times, and this was actually from a memoir from Prince Yusupov. So this was actually told by Yusupov himself what was happening there. He shot him in his stomach and even in the head, but miraculously Rasputin was still alive. He was not only alive, but he even got up and ran after Yusupov. This is when Prince Yusupov got scared, and he ran to his courtyard, where Rasputin was eventually shot by Purishkevich. And this is when Rasputin fell in the snow, but he was still alive. And the man wrapped him in some cloth and drove to a bridge in St. Petersburg and decided to drop him to the river there. It was called the Malaya Nevka River. When his body was found, he had water in his lungs, which indicated that he was still alive when he was floating in the river. And the thing that killed him was drowning. Prince Felix Yusupov and Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich role in the murder of Rasputin was quickly discovered. And the queen was not happy about that. In fact, she was so angered that she wanted both of them shot straight away by the firing squad without even trial. But instead, they had a different fate. Prince Yusupov was exiled to his country estate, and Duke Dmitry was sent to the Russian army in Persia. Rasputin was eventually buried on January 2nd of 1917, and the funeral was attended by was shortly followed by the royal family murders, and the whole family was unfortunately murdered. The Romanov family, the queen, the king, and their 4 children. Some people speculate that the downfall of the Russian Empire was the product of the monk, the holy man's curse, but it was most likely the result